I said this too many times, but all I'm trying to do is get people to steal my job. I have more shows than I need or deserve, and at the moment, my best way of allowing people to kind of get access to that is to just bring them into the room and have them work and have them be a voice of importance.
The purpose of Black Theater United creating this designer series and initiative to introduce all the different fields of design that are out there. One of our next steps is to creating a hub on our website. Let everyone know about fellowships that actually exist that nobody knows about. Paid internships that are actually already out there that nobody knows about. People like you that are saying, give me a call. What are you working on? I will help you. I will talk you through it. We're going to create that. So there's a place to go and you can find out all that information and be able to learn more and say, wow, I had this in me, didn't really know, and now I have a way of finding it out and I'm going to pursue it. My name is Lisa Dawn Cave, and I'm a proud founder of Black Theater United. Welcome to Before the Curtain Rises, the Designer Series. Now, let's welcome Jeremy Chernick, Special Effects Designer.
Hi, Lisa Dawn.
Fantastic! So, let's start this conversation with, where are you from?
I'm from, my parents raised me in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is right over the George Washington Bridge. My parents came from Washington Heights and family from the Lower East Side. And so we met in the middle. I always went to school in the city. And so I'm a little bit of a city kid and a little bit of a suburban kid. And, but yeah, I've been here most of my life.
Okay, fantastic. Before we go into the conversation, can you let us know what is special effects?
Yes. So it's like anything on fire, any sort of water, it's fog and smoke, it's snow, it's confetti, but it's also a lot of blood. I do a lot of blood and violence. And I think it's also now, I think that it's also, I involve myself in creating big moments. And so I sort of break a little bit of the rules and often am working with directors closely on creating like one big spectacular moment or a really complicated storytelling moment that involves any of the things I just listed and anything else. So it's evolved over my career.
Was special effects something you always wanted to pursue as a career? Did you even know it could be a career?
I didn't know it was a career. I didn't even know I wanted to do theater. It's like an accident with purpose, the early part of my career. So I went to undergrad in Queens College, and I did theater as like a fun side thing. I studied communication. And when I was sort of getting the end of my undergrad career, I had a professor there, Lawrence Rosenfield, who insisted that I leave and go out into the world in a way that I could afford to do, which was go to grad school and study communications. So I applied all around, and he was very insistent that wherever I wanted to go, it was not about whether the school was good, it was about whether the city spoke to me, or the town, or the environment. And so he kept referring to it as like Europe. In the olden days, you would go to Europe and learn about the world. And he was like, go off into America, because that's where you can basically afford to go and learn about the world. And I ended up in Chicago to study communications. And while I was in the Circle campus of the University of Chicago. And while I was there, I learned I was a very bad waiter, but I could get some work. There's like 1 million black box theaters. And so I could get work backstage in all of those different theaters. And that was in the early 90s when there was a lot of experimental theater. And so I got to sort of watch from the sidelines really interesting theater that at the time felt groundbreaking and now feels fun and silly and amazing. There was lots of there was experimentation with how much or little clothing you could wear. What would a puppet do in a very serious play? It had a lot of actors that are now very famous also in that experimental scene. So it was a great learning environment. And I was there for 2 or 3 years, and then it was too cold. And at that point, I started getting offered communication jobs, and they seemed terrible compared to the theater jobs. And the theater jobs seemed more fun and paid much less. So actually, I had 2 other friends that I am still friends with now from New York, and we decided that we wanted to go out into America and make theater. And we couldn't afford New York, and we didn't like Chicago, and we sort of went around the country trying to find a place to go, and we ended up in Austin, Texas. And we ended up there for all the right reasons. Like, the food was great, there was a good music scene, and it was super cheap. And the theater scene was not very, it wasn't huge. It was just like a small kind of artsy theater scene. And we went there and we started our own company called the Fabulous and Ridiculous Theater. It was not a very serious theater company because the acronym is FART.
Okay.
And we did a bunch of shows over the course of years. We raised money from like aunts and uncles and like community toy stores with advertising and programs, and we could put on shows for like $2,000 to $5,000, and we did. And we did all sorts of really, really silly shows, but we learned so much. Like, it was a pure learning environment where we could make all the mistakes in a very small town and still draw some audience, and we could break a lot of rules. And because it was basically such a small little group, we had to do all the jobs. We were in Austin, and I think we did 6 or 7 different shows over the course of 3 years. At the same time, I worked backstage everywhere I could. So that was in union theaters, very old ones with sandbags instead of stage weights, hemp houses, and the big touring houses and the tiny little regional theaters. So I sort of began to learn how all these different organizations worked and why they did what they did and how they chose the shows that they did. And I guess I was a sponge for understanding different audiences and what they might want at that point, as were the people I was working with. And then the surprise moment in my career happened when I didn't like the summers in Texas because it's really hot. And I never knew anything about the machine or the business of theater. And I learned from a friend that there are summer stocks. I'd never heard of a summer stock in my life. And I got a job in Massachusetts at the Berkshire Theater Festival. And in the application for that job, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what the jobs really structure out to. And so they were like, so I was applying to do like lighting or scenery. And the production manager there called me and was like, we've given away all those jobs, but we have a prop master job. Do you think you could do that? And I said yes, which was maybe true. And I ended up going there and spending 2 summers there. And we did 1 million shows, and I was really good at that because I could talk to the designers really well. I understood how things had to be used on stage from the experience that I had already had. And at the end of my 2nd year, the designers that I was working with were all saying, come to New York. Let's work, we can find you work. And I ended up actually getting a job as the associate prop master at Juilliard. Oh. So I went from running a theater company called Fart to Juilliard.
Okay.
And that sort of encompasses the sort of that early journey of like learning from a very rudimentary place and making things up and being given the freedom to fail, which has been a big cornerstone to my whole career, is like giving myself the space to really not do the best job in order to figure out what works. Right. And that's how I do my job now. And I worked at Juilliard for 4.5 years. And at the same time, I was on the Lincoln Center campus. And I began, at that time, there was a festival, Lincoln Center Festival was there It's no longer in existence, very sadly. And they brought all these international arts companies into the city for the summer. So they would do like 20 productions from all over the world. And inevitably, those companies would come and they would not have brought something.
Okay.
And I became the we need the very important loaf of bread that is baked in a very specific way for this specific Irish town. Or we need swords because they did a Iranian passion play where this was in 2002. The summer of 2002 was a weird time to bring in around 50 people from Iran. And they weren't allowed to bring any of their prop weapons. So I had to find all these Iranian prop weapons in a hurry. And that is how I transitioned into special effects, because I started being asked to do all these strange things. And the production manager there called me, and he was working with a Chinese director named Chen Shizhen, who I've worked with quite a few times. And that director was going to create a production of Orphan of Zhao, which is a Chinese tale. And his design idea, or the design idea, was a 2,000-gallon pool of blood that the actors would walk through and then walk up onto a white platform. And they would act and they would make patterns with their bloody feet. And he basically said, could you make 2,000 gallons of blood for $1.75 a gallon?
Okay.
And I did. It was really hard, and I made it in buckets, and they would test it, and we did it. And I didn't know that there were special effects companies in the world. And they had wanted that job. And I got this random job. I didn't know I was competing against anyone. And from there, people started calling me and offering me jobs. And I was working on a Broadway show within months.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So can we segue to some of the Broadway shows that you've done and what special effects that you've created on those shows?
Sure. My first Broadway show, I believe, was Tarzan. It might be 3 Days of Rain. I'm not sure. I don't know the chronology, but Tarzan, in that show, in the opening of the show, there's a baby Tarzan, and baby Tarzan is put inside of a trunk to sleep. And then for reasons that I can't remember, the parents go away, and a panther comes in, and it is looking to kill Tarzan. And when the panther looks into the trunk, the baby pees in the panther's face. The panther stumbles back, knocks over a gun, which falls over and fires, and then scares the panther away. Okay. So I worked with people to make the trunk that opened, that shot a stream of water on a cue, and then the trunk could, I think, close, and then the rifle could fall and was hinged and perfectly controlled and fired when it fell. So I did that sort of sequence. That was my first job, and my second job was on 3 Days of Rain, I think, where Julia Roberts was in the show, and every night there's an important diary, and they had to burn it. And I dealt with the prop people and with the fire department and with other special effects people to figure out how to safely hand a very famous actor a book and say, sure, go ahead and burn it every night and everything is going to be fine. So we developed like a carefully made cover and safe way for her to do that. So that was sort of the intro.
Right. Well, I'm going to take you to something that we're both familiar with because we both worked on together, Frozen. And can you talk about the snow and the glitter and the fire finger, all that stuff?
Frozen. We've done Frozen for a long time.
Yes, we have.
Frozen is just a tremendous show for me. And it makes me use all different kinds of tools to actually to be very subtle. It's not supposed to be like heavy-handed. Sometimes I do shows which are like special effects. And this is just like, oh, the princess walks on and we just want fog to follow her around. But that show and working with Disney is sort of the most glorious and the most difficult in a lot of ways because they have huge expectations and they have big desires, but then technically sometimes having to deliver these giant things is very hard. So that show has a really exciting opening sequence where two little girls are making all sorts of snow magic on a bed, and those beds have mechanisms that drop snow. They have low fog coming in around their beds. There's like a burst of snow that's sort of a confetti cannon that shoots as a little girl is supposed to fall and get hurt. I am Elsa, and I am making it snow. Snow time.
Snowing.
Yay. We're all gonna go on. Go.
Yeah.
He's gonna go on me. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Incorporated with lighting and video
Right.
and scenery as just one example. We drop snow all over the stage during much of the show, and how do we deal with cleaning that up, and how do we deal with no one falling? And really, to me, one of the triumphs of that show is the fact that we do that dress pull,
Yes.
and that ideally that the dress being pulled and falling on the ground behind is covered.
Right.
And that is strangely one of the hardest things that we have to do. So we cover the stage with fog, and we do it in such a way that at the perfect moment when we pull the dress off, she needs to be surrounded by all this fog on the floor
Right.
so that it goes away.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to take you somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The rain in The Outsiders.
That's really different, actually, than Frozen in a good designery way, which is in Frozen, and the way that Frozen worked, we got set designs, and then we built everything into the set design. So it was sort of like the director and the set designer talked, the set was designed, and then we put our stuff in and around it. And the way that The Outsiders worked was we figured out the tricks sort of first, or with the set designer. It was very different. They knew they wanted to have this massive rumble, which is just an amazing moment in theater. And 2 years ago, the choreographers and the set designers and costume designers and makeup designers and director and a couple of actors basically went to a warehouse, and we put all kinds of different mud mixtures on the ground. We dumped rain on them in very low-tech ways, and they played with sound at that time in order to sort of start to figure out how to do that fight and what they could physically do to not hurt each other, and there's sort of a few different phases to the choreography, but like they wanted a messy phase, and then a very slowed down phase, and then a very in unison phase, and we did all of that by making them wet and covering them with blood and mud. And we did this 2 separate times before we even went into a theater. And we learned so much about what it's like to be wet for 15 minutes after the show. How dirty can you be and how uncomfortable is it? What does mud look like, and will anyone ever see it? How much blood do we need, and will anyone ever see it? And that it's very hard to actually light rain. That was another big thing, is that sometimes you can be really pouring, you can be dumping so much water on the stage, but if it's not lit, you don't see it.
Right.
And so it was a really interesting and intense period of development, and the set ended up having to be designed around the rain, which is a really unique way of approaching it. Usually the set design is done sort of earlier, and then they're shoving things in. And in this case, the rain is such a big element and it has to go somewhere. The draining of rain is really complex. It's the thing that no one sees,
Right.
but it's more complicated than dropping the rain in some ways. We have a whole system to make it rain, but the really, really complicated stuff is how do you get rid of the rain? Where does it go? And how do you not flood the basement? Right. And that is really collaboration with the scenic design team was AMP. And they did such a good job of just like allowing the space for all of that to work, and then production management obviously comes in and makes sure that we do it right.
Right.
It was really something.
Yeah.
We also light that set on fire.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I mean, that was also one of the highlights of the show.
Yeah. So that's where like I said, like my job has evolved over time, where I can be more involved than I was in an earlier part of my career in helping and being part of creating the moment, which in the case of The Outsiders, we were all invited to throw ourselves in and have opinions and say our opinions out loud, which that's just a style of director.
Right,
Some
right.
people are not like, there are directors who have visions that are so clear that our job is to fulfill the vision.
Right,
in this
right.
case, this was like a very, it was a little bit messy in a way that was successful.
Right, right.
It was really cool.
It's exciting learning about special effects and that it is an actual career out there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of plumbing. I know a lot about plumbing. It's like a really random skill.
Okay.
But it's not hard plumbing and it's not correct plumbing. It's just theater plumbing. And when I started, I think one of the reasons I did well is because I did do props for a while, and I think props has to know a little bit of everything. They need to know how to sew. They need to know how to clean. They need to know how to make furniture. They need to know how to make things edible. There's so many different ways to approach props, and I came at special effects with that sort of what if we did it, I looked at it from different ways. And I also I was a terrible lighting technician, but I learned enough to understand that lighting could control special effects. And I think I have a lot of mentors, or I've had a lot of mentors in my life that have helped me look at this career in different ways. And one of them was Greg Mee, who was a special effects designer before me. So I did not invent this job. I just made it into a different version of a job. And he was doing special effects in the 80s and in the 90s, and he was working for many years. He's retired now. But a lot of the ways that those earlier effects, and these are big shows he worked on Les Mis and Phantom and some of the biggies, they were done less integrated in terms of how they get controlled. We control everything through lighting now, or either it's all lighting or it's an actor does it. That's sort of my world. Very rarely is there a stage manager with a stick, which is what I think the original versions of a lot of this was that it was very low tech, or there was a big button backstage that you hit and X happened. And now it's much more integrated. And I think that has to do with modern technology, young, smart people that I work with, and just a different approach. But he created for me an opportunity to take my skills and to incorporate them with his knowledge, and he really promoted me to have my own version and to sort of argue with him about how we should approach something, which I use in my own life now when I'm working with teams or young people who I'm the name of designer, but they're working with me. I'm constantly trying to allow everyone to have a big opportunity to feel ownership over the project. And he really taught me that. And the other people that I really think pushed me forward was Kate Dale, who ran the prop shop at Juilliard and still runs the prop shop at Juilliard. I don't want to say how long Kate's been at Juilliard, but it's a long time. And she was a master at understanding that when you learn that you're really good at something, that's what you should focus on. And that one of the reasons that I think she had stayed in her job for so long is because she always said, I'm so good at this. I could become an administrator, but then I would probably be bad at that. That's not my skill set. And I think that as I've found things that I'm good at, I'm like, oh, I'm good at this. I want to get better.
Right.
But I don't necessarily want a different job, if that makes sense.
Okay. I think that's going to take me to a question. Why did you want to be a part of this design initiative? And do you think it's important to have diversity in the field that you're in? Or in diversity in the theater industry altogether?
Yes. So I have to attack it from two ways, right? So when I first started working in theater, not only was almost everyone that was backstage or in the house white, but they were mostly men. almost entirely. There would occasionally be, I think, a woman who had broken through, and many of those women were incredible and amazing, and that was difficult, but it was really just a lot of white men. And I was young and I looked around, and I don't know that even occurred to me, because you're so young and you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm allowed in this room. I can't believe that I'm able to participate. And there was a moment for me in those early days in Lincoln Center with the Lincoln Center Festival, where all these international shows were coming over. And I was completely flabbergasted by the art that I was being allowed to not only see, but work on. And now we're talking about the most diverse art I have still to this day ever seen. You know, puppet companies from Africa, Korean mystical shows. There were that Chinese show that I worked on, Orphan of Zhao. I mean, these are really amazing and interesting and diverse theater, and they did things so different. They changed the way I looked at how you could tell a story. The fact that I would just get to be in the room and see that, I felt was really important. And then over the years, although there's been incremental change, it's been tiny. There was a moment in my career where I started working with way more women, white women. And the method in which we were making theater became different and better. And then over time, there was new voices of more diverse men and women who came in. And I think, again, it's made the entire process better and for me more comfortable. Like now we have way more diverse ideas and origin stories. And I think all of us are just telling our origin stories. And so that's a big part of it. So is it important? It's important for social reasons. It's important because this industry does tell stories, and we should not be just telling the same stories that the same people have told for, in this country, however many years.
Right.
I didn't come from a place of extreme privilege, and I have learned this is my own interpretation of the world, but I don't have a pool of people that I can pull from grad school. And I don't have a pool of people that I can pull from I can pull from different industries. I could try and pull someone out of the movie industry or music videos or commercials. But what I'm learning over time is that special effects is so strange and unique in the theater that there aren't any rules about who should and who. There's no gateway at all. There's just access. And my team of people that I've worked with now, some of whom for 20 years and some of whom I meet all, brand new, is very diverse. And it makes my work and the team's work much better because I don't look at TikTok, but my team does. And they might bring some idea in that they have from their reference point or from the music videos that inspired them. And I think that my work and music videos are very interconnected. And I did work on lots of music videos in a long time ago, but like that sort of like input is just so exciting and vital. And so I don't even know if I answered your question anymore, but I know that like there aren't that lack of pedigree that you do need to get into some other parts of the design industry. You don't really need it for special effects. You need training and you need to be able to be brave. Mm-hmm. And I think also because earlier when I talked about having my own theater company and working in Chicago, I was very poor for a really, really, really long time, more than a decade, where I was making between $14,000 and $30,000 a year, which, that was a long time ago, so maybe it's a little more in future times, but I made very little money and I just worked really hard at it. And I think that as I started to do this, I don't want anyone to have to be broke for years and years and years. I think that that's not great. But I think that there is a place for theater artists that maybe don't come from the most financially secure, supported background that actually fit in really well with my teams.
Okay, you brought up about being in a room that were just men. And then you mentioned having women appear in the room. This is very much, of course, personal. I'm a woman. I'm also a Black woman, and I have found myself in rooms that I was the only. So
I've been in those rooms where you were the only.
there you go.
A lot.
Yeah. So can you kind of connect for me now from when the women started, that you started appearing, where they are now, and how that shift can possibly happen for more Black voices that are still missing in those rooms to be a part?
I think the shift happened by I think it must have to do with time in some weird way. The shift from like the early Broadway rooms I was in, which were just like a man fest, the shift into more women showing up. There, as I said, there were certain groundbreaking women who have been doing this since before I was here. But I think that there were, I'm going to give a lot of credit to Christine Jones, who I started working with, I think at around the time I met you, but like 2014. And when we started working together, the whole approach to how a show is designed for me changed entirely and became more collaborative and more rooted in like powerful ideas. And the way she designs is that way. But I think from there, I ended up working more and more with I can't explain why, because I'm not a sociologist, but like for whatever reason, from around 2012 or 14, tons of women started showing up in the design world and in this, in other fields backstage, including you. Lisa Dawn was the female stage manager of Rocky, which I think you were the only woman on our side of the house.
I have to think, but you might be right.
I think it's just dudes.
And I find myself in a lot right now.
Yeah,
so.
I think it was just men. I had 2 associates who were women. I'm just trying to think if they were even, and then Alex's associate, I believe, was a woman. So associates,
right,
but not the top job, and that just slowly evolved over time to become more diverse that way. And I think that slowly of evolution over time is a not great way for diversity to wash into this industry, and so time will be part of it. But I think we just have to be doing play. I think it starts with writing. I think that people have to be, we have to be giving access to the plays and musicals that are not being written by one type of person, but we need the voices of others. And I think that's happening. And I think then also naturally the design fields will follow suit, as will directors, because I don't want to pigeonhole anyone, and I don't believe that one person should only be working with the same within their own cultural and reference. But I think that it's important that those voices are there.
Right.
So in my own tiny universe of design and production, because I do, and you might know this, I do way more than theater. I did the VMAs this year. I made Doja Cat get swirled around in a tornado of newspapers, and I do music videos and cooking shows, and I did the Tony Awards, the live show, and so I do have a little bit more diversity in the type of work that I do. And I personally, in the last since the pandemic, so whatever year we call that done, I brought in more people onto my team and more diverse people onto my team because I needed to get excited again. And I needed to get new, fresh ideas. And also, I found myself in a much more powerful position than I was. I didn't know before the pandemic, I didn't know that I had any juice. And now after the pandemic, I was like, oh, I really have a lot of shows and I have a lot of options. And I'm not so nervous about like, will I have this career? I kind of have it. And so once I accepted that, which is not so easy for a Gen Xer, to just be like, I guess I made it. And I might just be able to do this forever, or as long as I want to. I really have reached out and created a whole new diverse pool of people. And I have a company that I am part of, and that company has always been diverse. But it's been diverse because we don't just do theater. And theater seems to be a much more, had previously been a much more white space. And music videos and television is a much more diverse space for whatever reason. And so the company is diverse. And then it just became about bringing that diversity into all the other aspects of my part of the work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm doing that in the old-fashioned way of just hiring assistants and bringing on apprentices and allowing people access. That's been a big one, is that, you know, I'm very open to anyone just coming and sitting next to us during tech. I'm very open to, you know, giving that access and having people try and figure out what it is that I'm doing and why. And it, since the pandemic and even before, I think the producers are much more actively involved in allowing that sort of thing. I like everyone to get paid. That's a huge part of it. So in general, there's some kind of payment that I try and force into that environment. Broadway has been pretty good about having a little bit of funding to have an apprentice on a lot of the shows. I've had them on Sweeney Todd, and that was actually really interesting and successful. And actually an associate that I work with now, she got an apprenticeship with Harry Potter. And there was a special effects apprenticeship that lasted a year, and she's a young Black woman, and she did that apprenticeship for a year, and now I'm about to do my second or third show with her. And so some of that is that those opportunities are being made, and then I selfishly am also like grabbing them up.
Selfishly grabbing them up so you can actually give them out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I said this too many times, but all I'm trying to do is get people to steal my job. I have too many. I have more shows than I need or deserve. And at the moment, my best way of allowing people to kind of get access to that is to just bring them into the room and have them work and have them be a voice of importance. And on the last show, on The Outsiders, I have a co-designer, someone I've worked with for since they were maybe 16 years old and are now 34. And that's Lilith Me. And so one of the first trans designers.
Okay.
So access now is becoming more urgent for me, where I'm like, okay, you've been an assistant, you're an associate. I'm very loose about titles. If people want to make up their own titles that get them closer to what they want, I'm completely fine with it. I do not have to follow all the rules because I made them up. And and that's been a big part of it for me. And so I've grown this team. So now I have, oh my gosh, I probably have almost 10 different people working for me. And they're all diverse. And in some way or other. And it's really exciting. It is weird occasionally to just be like, this is the head of this weird diverse group, but this is how it has to happen. At least now.
Right. Okay, great. How does one know that this is a path for them? How does one know, since you did say earlier on, like there's no schooling for this, right? You just somehow went, oh, this is kind of different. These are things that, you know, are abstract. Like, how do you know?
So I just don't think that there is no direct path to special effects. I don't think at all. It just doesn't exist. The path, therefore, is bravery and being like, let's try something. And it's a little bit about your passion internally and what you want to do. So if you're a young person who is in school or out of school or thinking about creating an artistic work, whether that's on camera or on a stage, I think there is a lot of experimenting and a lot of there's so much importance in just being like, I have this crazy idea. I wonder if it'll work, and figuring out whether it works or not. But one of the ways to do that with a little bit more safety would be to just reach out and call me. Because I have toys and I have things and I love experimenting. And I even just worked on a small student film where, or maybe it's not a student film, but like a first film, like a short that someone wanted to do, and they just needed like a pot of spaghetti to explode. They just wanted all that spaghetti sauce to go, and like that's really easy, and it's no big deal for me to just talk someone through that and explain how it happens. And there's also like a lot of opportunities from different industries, and that's what special effects that's how come I've been successful in my job, is because I can pull from music videos, I can pull from theater, I can pull from opera, I can pull from modern dance, and I've done a lot of that as well, where I'm like, oh, that's super cool. I'm gonna pull that right in. So, and that's why I'm here talking to you, because Black Theater United, I think, is creating a pathway to people like me and other designers and other people who work in theater in general. And I really hope that there is a easy way for people to get in touch with me, because I think that there are young Black people who are very interested in creating content, whether that content is on your phone or on a stage. And I think that that content often will have a special effects element to it. And by a special effects element, I mean like 1 second of this cool looking shot or 1 second of this cool thing on stage. There's also, in a lot of the stories that are being told, there might be violence, there might be joy, and those two things often have special effects involved in them. And they don't need to be highly realistic. They can be very abstract. They can be tiny moments. There's so many different ways that you could approach it. And I think that guidance and tools are really the basics for how to get that. And I think that this program would give some of that guidance, give some of those tools.
Right. And one thing that the purpose of Black Theater United creating this designer series and initiative is to do just that, to introduce all the different fields of design that are out there. And we're also, one of our next steps is to creating a hub on our website that is going to let everyone know about fellowships that actually exist that nobody knows about. You know, paid internships that are actually already out there that nobody knows about. People like you that are saying, give me a call. What are you working on? I will help you. I will talk you through it. We're going to create that. So there's a place to go and you can find out all that information and be able to learn more and say, wow, I had this in me, didn't really know, and now I have a way of finding it out and I'm going to pursue it. So it's great that you and your colleagues, everybody has said yes to doing this, and it's going to be great. I really think so.
Cool.
Thank you, Jeremy, for sharing the world of special effects with us.
Thank you for having me.
Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. For more resources and updates, please visit our website at blacktheaterunited.com. Black Theater United, creating pipelines for you, the future of our industry.